Bet the Board presents Stay Green. Stay Green is your first stop for all the metrics, matchups, and money-making opportunities at the track each race week. This is Stay Green, the NASCAR betting podcast. Here are your hosts, Todd Fuhrman and racing analyst Chris Werme.
Welcome into the Stay Green podcast, part of the Bet the Board podcast network. It's all things NASCAR all the time, and the playoff races continue to heat up. Elimination race weekend as we go to the high-banked oval / road course of the Charlotte Roval on Sunday afternoon. I'm your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host on this fine program, Chris Werme. And Wormser, Talladega officially in the rearview mirror. And I'm still not sure after watching that race, not once but twice, how people bet real money when we go to superspeedways.
Yeah, I didn't watch it. I'm not going to lie. I posted on social media what are a couple things I need to take away from this week's race. I had some unhappy people that were commenting about the racing, and to hear that there was a 28-car wreck late in the race was just one of those things that I feel like I got it right by just being on the sidelines. And I think to kind of sum up the weekend, I saw a meme that, you know, the dog sitting there saying everything is fine with everything on fire. I mean, you have the DVP clock. You have now this Ticketmaster thing you have with NASCAR where they're now the partner with NASCAR. People are upset about that. You know, CW talking about potentially calling races remotely from the Charlotte studios.
Which they do for some second-tier college sporting events these days. So I have to think that is very much in the cards from a potential cost-cutting standpoint if they elect to go that route.
Oh, I didn't realize that they had done that. And then obviously you have the lawsuit where there was injunctions filed. I believe it was today, just to kind of move that along. So as a fan, I do understand the frustrations. But as a sports bettor, you still kind of have to see the signal through the noise. You know, this is just a lot of noise that people are talking about. We have to sit here and think, how do we profit off it? How do we, continue to find value in this sport and make money? And from the damaged vehicle, there's a lot of people that are commenting me or DMing me about how, listen, we're hoping at the end of the year that it all equals out. If we bet on a guy or bet against a guy, we hope that they are affected similarly throughout the entire season. We can't pick and choose. I think you can pick and choose as a track if there's potential tire issues. Okay, maybe you just back off your entire card. But I think to pick and choose would be a little bit of a fool's errand and could end up costing you money because you can't pick this one right and that one wrong and continually do that throughout the season. So glad we were on the sidelines for Talladega, but man, we got one more week of
chaos. Full-blown, unadulterated chaos.
Yeah. I mean, trying to handicap this race, we'll get into this in a second, but it's not easy. There's so many layers. And but then I think we're getting into, in my opinion, the meat and potatoes of the playoffs from a betting perspective and actual playoff implications. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, we're kind of done with the gimmicks of the NASCAR postseason. We get into actual, real hardcore racing with 8 drivers vying for a championship. And this is more or less stage 1, not going to be the longest stage for us by any stretch of the imagination. Stage 2, as Worm kind of alluded to, we'll cover our breakdown of the Roval, some playoff scenarios, drivers to watch. And stage 3, we'll hit the quick reset button on the postseason picture as William Byron has officially become the first member of the field to move into the round of 8. But, before we wave the green, white checkered flag on stage 1, you mentioned some of the uncertainty, the unpredictable nature of Talladega. I mean, I know that some NASCAR fans love it from an entertainment standpoint. To your point, though, the meddlesome nature of what we see from rule changes and inconsistency and all of that, it makes it hard on some level to take this round of the playoffs seriously when we look at all the coin flipping that goes on instead of trying to reward some of the best drivers in the sport.
To your point, I can't remember a season where I didn't have a significant amount of championship outrights at this point in the season. I mean, we're sitting on a Chase Briscoe that, I mean, I guess we've still captured a little bit of value, but ultimately at this point in the season, we're heavily invested in maybe 2 or 3 drivers that we think are going to move on to Phoenix and potentially win the championship. And until you get through this point in the season, you can't do it, because you dodge a bullet. Let's just say you're Denny Hamlin, you dodge a bullet at Talladega, and then you come to a place where you haven't been very successful at the Roval, and you still can't feel confident. And because of that, his odds to win the championship are probably slightly higher than they would be in any other season. So we've been saying it all year long that once we get through Talladega, you get through the Roval, I feel like the real playoffs start. That's when the cream will truly rise. And, hopefully we see something like Ryan Blaney, where we see a guy that's, sitting in that 15 to 18 to 1 range, catch fire late and show some speed all the way to Phoenix.
Well, there may be a driver or two that we can highlight as we get towards stage 3, but we'll wave the green, white checkered flag on stage 1 and move ahead to the more important portions of the program. You can follow Chris on social media at Chris Werme 15. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there, but for all things Bet the Board, be sure to follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And when we go to stage 2 and we begin to look at the Roval and some of the expectations there, part road course, part oval, would love them to just scrap this particular format and concept and go to the 1.5 miles at Charlotte with a normal racing distance, given that 1.5 mile tracks have been where this next-gen car performs at its best. So instead of getting into the specs and breaking down some of the individual stages, I feel this provides the perfect avenue for all of our listeners, the guys and girls out there, to take out their pens and paper, to allow Chris to perform complex mathematics and lay out a variety of playoff scenarios that he tried to share with me before we started recording. I still don't understand, so I'll be right there with all of you listeners trying to make sense, heads and tails, of exactly what he's got to share.
So this is one of the very few weekends throughout the season where I don't think the fastest car typically wins. I feel like a serviceable car with the right strategy will win. So it's really hard to handicap individual drivers in this race without understanding what their situation is moving or attempting to move on into the playoffs, into the final, or the round of 8. So I'm going to just kind of run through quickly what drivers need to score in order to clinch based on the 2 separate scenarios. Obviously, if you win, you're in. Okay.
That part I got. That part I fully understanding that if you win the race and you're a playoff driver, you automatically advance. Okay, got it.
Obviously, when you're in, but Joey Logano, Daniel Suarez, Austin Cindric, and Chase Briscoe only can get in with help. They are going to need help from one of the drivers that are currently technically in or above that cut line. So if a non-playoff driver wins, or William Byron wins the race, Christopher Bell is regardless. He's in regardless of finish. Kyle Larson would clinch with 4 points. Hamlin would clinch with 26 points. Bowman 30 points. Blaney 31. Reddick 42. Chase with 43. Okay, those are clinching. All right, they're not just that. That's not what they need to get through. That's clinching. Okay, if Joey Logano, Daniel Suarez, Austin Cindric, or Chase Briscoe win the race, this is what these drivers would need in order to clinch. Okay, not get through, clinch. Bell, 11 points. Larson, 16 points. Hamlin, 38 points. Bowman, 42. Blaney, 43. Reddick, 54. Elliott, 55. Okay, now this is just a basis. However, when we were talking about this before the race, you said, yeah, what happens if Denny all of a sudden loses all his track position, has damage? I'm like, well, then just throw everything out the window and everything will change.
Very, very helpful exercise in the grand scheme of what we're doing as we try and figure out how to give ourselves a competitive advantage when it comes to betting the Roval. But I digress. Go ahead. Continue.
Yep. And so that's the playoff picture for clinching. And why that's important is with 6, 7, 8 laps to go in this race, drivers tend to get comfortable if they've clinched, with the exception of Jimmy Johnson. And I think without Jimmy Johnson making that massive mistake all those years ago that we remember oh so dearly.
I don't want to talk about it.
I don't think we would see drivers be so comfortable. If you go back and you watch the Roval from last year, Kyle Larson was giving up spots left and right because he knew that he had 12 or 13 spots to play with. And so he wasn't racing that aggressively. And if you have any money on Kyle Larson, you're going to be chucking your remote through the TV if he's losing a matchup late or he's falling out of the top 10, because his job is to move on in the playoffs. So that's why we kind of wanted to set the stage. Where are these guys? Who can clinch? And the guys that are clinching, you're looking at Chris Bell as a potential, as someone we could look to. Obviously, Kyle Larson. But that's about it. Those are the two guys that I would highlight that are close to clinching, that we might be able to pick off a little bit of value, but I want to wait and run through them individually. But as we typically do, Todd, I'll let you start us with the rundown of the drivers we're going to cover.
Yeah, we may as well do that right now. We'll get into tier one, and we do have a road course ringer, a driver that NASCAR fans know all too well when it comes to racing on tracks where you have to make right and left turns, and that would be Shane Van Gisbergen. He opens the week as the favorite and is still taking money at a number that's gotten a little bit shorter, basically 5-1. And the other drivers that we'll put in that same class in terms of the way odds makers view them is a pair of Hendrick teammates and Kyle Larson, anywhere from 7-1 on the low end, upwards of 8. William Byron has been bet down a touch, as high as 10-1 at some shops, now in that 8-1 range. I'm not sure there's much to be said about Shane Van Gisbergen. We know how good he is at this particular track type. He was passed in the last lap at Watkins Glen by Chris Buescher. He wins that race. Maybe he opens as low as 4-1. But this is a guy, one of the rare exceptions, where if he goes out there, looks like the dominant car in practice, puts the car on the pole, we could see him go off at a price of 5-2.
Yes, I would agree that this is SVG is a guy you could see go off at a very low price, some of maybe the lowest that we've seen all year. However, this is where the Roval's slightly different. You set up your car for a road course race for the interior of the Roval. However, a lot of the passing zones, or a lot of the passing, does happen on the actual oval. So if your car's set up for a road course and all of a sudden you go to on the oval part of the track where SVG is going to struggle the most anyway, this could provide an opportunity for drivers to pick off on those weaknesses. So do I think that he'll get better throughout the race? Absolutely. But I do think that if there was something I could pick, a nitpick at SVG where he might not be able to perform as well as he has at other road courses or the street course in Chicago, that's where I could see him having some issues. However, you know, he loses Watkins Glen, but remember, he also got had a terrible scenario where they had to stay out on older tires, and that's what essentially the race was won way earlier in the race by Chris Buescher than the very last lap. So it's not like SVG gave that race away. He could have easily won that. He could have easily won Chicago. So if you picked off some of the better prices on SVG, congratulations. I think that's great. It could go off shorter because you know he's going for the win. Points don't matter to him. He's not going to stay out there. He's going to keep his track position all day long. At 5-1, I'm willing to go ahead and see the flop and practice and qualifying and see where the odds pop after that.
You know, he'll also have the opportunity, along with AJ Allmendinger, to get a full race under their belt on Saturday. We know the Xfinity
Correct.
Cars aren't like the Cup cars, but in terms of passing zones and trying to figure out how the car needs to be set up to be able to maximize the speed, it speaks volumes for what those guys can do. And we'll get to Dinger in a minute. He's been one of the best when it comes to overall speed rating, driver rating, average running position, and a lot of the key metrics we look at. So the pair of Hendrick teammates, I mean, William Byron, 12th for average speed on road courses this year. I mean, you look at our last 2 years, Chicago has kind of been the one where he struggled the most. Didn't exactly show a ton of speed at Sonoma or Watkins Glen, where he was an afterthought earlier this playoffs. But in terms of the Roval, 5th best driver rating, 8th best average running position. Meanwhile, Kyle Larson, none of the underlying metrics that we've seen from him at the Roval in a limited sample size suggest a number this short. But then again, it is Kyle Larson.
Yeah. Well, I just remember last year, you know, this could be a great number. Like, gosh, we're going to see something kind of weird this weekend with a guy like Kyle Larson. I feel like, let's just say Larson goes out there and pulls it. I think you see him go out there and try to win stage one. However, if Kyle Larson pulls it, his odds could drop to maybe, let's just say 4 or 5-1. I don't think he gets much shorter than that. But then I believe his chances of winning the race are reduced because he's going to go out there and try to win stage one, take that playoff point, bank those points, and then he could see himself getting locked in if there's a couple of retirements during the race. it's a little different with, see, there's another driver that I feel like could have this scenario. But then you also look at a guy like William Byron. I can't see him trying to go up there and bank a stage point unless he pulls it. Otherwise, I think he's flipping the stage. So unless Byron pulls it, I don't see him staying out to win stage one. I see him flipping. However, if he does put it on the pole, be careful if betting him to win this race, because he could just say, I'm already through. If I can leave with one playoff point going into the next round, we're going to take it. So with that being said, if he finds himself flipping stage one, and maybe he finds himself the top running driver in stage two, he could just stay out in stage two. He's going to go ahead and take those chances for playoff points. I think he would do that. He'd have to have a rocket of a car in order for him to flip the stage when leading both, if he's leading either stage. So although I do like Byron, there's a small chance that he could stay out and try to win a stage if the opportunity presents itself. I don't think that they can go and take that unless they pull it. They might need a few breaks to fall their way. But that being said, I do think Byron all day is going to try to keep track position. So if you're looking for a driver to, maybe just key on when it comes to matchups, or maybe a top 5 price, I don't hate William Byron at either of those.
When we go into stage two, I mean, that's where things start to get, tier two, things start to get a little bit more interesting. I mean, Tyler Reddick, AJ Allmendinger, Chris Buescher, Chase Elliott, Christopher Bell, Ty Gibbs, Michael McDowell. We can go on and on with drivers that are priced in the teens. I mean, Tyler Reddick has been the model of consistency with road course speed. He did struggle in the playoff race at Watkins Glen, which was a little bit surprising. Yeah. Never really contended for much of anything. But in terms of the Roval, he's got an average finish of 7th. He's got a second-best next-gen speed ranking, second-best drive rating, second-best average running position, which all fall in line right behind AJ Allmendinger. When we look at those two guys, kind of the leaders in the clubhouse in terms of tier two, do either one of them stand out to you in terms of a guy that you'd want to isolate in the outright market, or that you may want to identify pre-week in some of the head-to-heads?
Well, I'm not touching Reddick with a 10-foot pole, and it has nothing to do with whether I think he's going to have speed or not. If you watch this race from last year, he went out there and dominated stage one, was able to get some more points in stage two, and he was probably the only driver that could make passes throughout the entire race. But then you find yourself with, taking stage points in stage two. You find yourself, back in traffic late in the race. And once he works his way up to like 10th place and he's clear by 20, 25 points, you're not going to see him step on the gas. I think you're going to see a lot of drivers just stay passive late in the race, happy to be locked in, not burning their stuff up, just preparing for a potential late race restart, because that's all it is. It's survive in advance. And that's why I don't like Reddick as much. AJ Allmendinger will be going for track position all race. You know that. So if you're going to give me two drivers, one that needs to score some stage points and one that needs to win the race, I'm going to take the one that can only benefit from winning the race. I'm going to take AJ Allmendinger in that scenario when it comes to outright prices. Now, when it comes to matchups, or it comes to whether it's a top 5 or top 10, that's a little different, because I do anticipate Reddick to be more consistent than a driver like Dinger that's checkers or wreckers. So although Dinger will be going for track position all day, he still is checkers or wreckers. And he's a guy that even if he's running top 3 in the final restart, he could find himself last on the lead lap, spinning out, trying to win a race. So I like Dinger as an outright price, but maybe not the top 3, top 5 stuff, because he will be so aggressive late in the race.
Chris Buescher finally broke through and actually won a road course race. We have talked about him at great lengths, being a guy that you almost just bet blindly on some of these road courses given the finishes, but you now see some of that reflected in the price. The top 10 market, that's a ship that sailed to a certain extent, at least in the pre-week. 12-1, in my opinion, a little bit short in the outright market. And we'll mention Chase Elliott in a similar breath, because Chase has been a sneaky strong performer at this particular track, with the 3rd best next-gen speed ranking, 3rd best drive rating, 3rd best average running position. He just doesn't have the overall finishes to go along with it, because he seems to find trouble at every single turn when it matters most deep into these races.
Yeah, when Chris Buescher, I think you hit the nail on the head. This is short for a guy that qualifies poorly. And track position's hard. It's going to be harder to pass this week at the Roval, especially with some of the changes that they've made. It'd be harder to pass this week than it was at Watkins Glen. He did need a break at Watkins Glen because he did start so deep in the field. And I think we saw him go off at as high as 33-1 at Watkins Glen. Yes, he was able to win the race, but we haven't seen any speed in qualifying out of RFK at all this year. So no reason to jump on this 12-1 price. This is just kind of trapping money, in my opinion, that people are just looking at this saying, well, he won the last road course race and you're going to give me 12-1. I love that. But a lot had to go right for him to win. And oh, by the way, you're probably going to see a better price after practice and qualifying. Chase Elliott, probably one of the best cars last year. The race kind of got taken from him with a funky caution when he was about ready to pit. That flipped his track position, and then it was kind of survive. That was his goal, was to just advance. This is the crazy thing. If you beat the market on Chase Elliott, it's because he qualified in the top 3 or 5. Okay, that's great. But then if he qualifies in the top 3 or top 5, he's probably going to take stage points, which means you're going to be able to find Chase live at a higher price. I just don't think you can win a stage and still win this race. I just think it's too hard to pass. Track position is too important. So you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't here with Chase Elliott. I don't see him as a contender to win the race. Do I think he'll be fast? Absolutely. Do I think he will control his own destiny to get in the playoffs? Absolutely. That being said, I don't think he's going to be great from an outright perspective. Maybe you can look at him in the matchup market if you can find someone who's in a similar situation to him where you're just going to bet the faster car. But if you find him matched up with someone that's not in the playoffs with nothing to lose, that driver is going to have track position all day long. And so although you might be beating the market at 14-1 on Chase, you could be reducing your chances to win if he qualifies well and you, in fact, do beat the market.
Christopher Bell, Ty Gibbs out of the JGR camp. We may as well group Martin Truex Jr. in there. All kind of in that 18 to 20 range. I mean, Christopher Bell, good underlying numbers, consistently inside the top 10 from that particular standpoint. Ty Gibbs, meanwhile, wasn't fast at Watkins Glen, but he's been outstanding on road courses, arguably one of his best disciplines. And then Martin Truex Jr. I mean, these are the kind of prices that we used to salivate over trying to bet him on road courses. But he also has 3 straight finishes here at the Roval of 17th or worse. Not running to bet Truex at this point. Maybe he does break through in the next 5 races. But when you look at his JGR teammates, Bell and Ty Gibbs, before we get into some of the other performers, either one of these guys noteworthy in any way, shape, or form?
Well, I think Bell has to operate under this notion that he's probably in. If Bell, last year, Chris Bell was running second, but they were so far ahead. I think you only lose 26 seconds on pit road that he only sacrificed 2 stage points and was able to flip the stage and went out there and took the lead. Unfortunately, they over-adjusted on the car and he wasn't very good. But it was, I felt like at that moment, Adam Stevens was playing chess when everyone else was playing checkers. To only lose 2 stage points and still flip the stage, I thought was remarkable. So that is always an option if you're looking at some of these drivers, but you got to get out to a good lead. So I do like Chris Bell at this 18-1 price. I think that if I had to pick an outright in the drivers that are not locked in, so everyone but William Byron, I think that this is kind of the best guy or the best price out there. Ty Gibbs, this is his best shot to win he's had in a while. He's got nothing to lose. He's going to be going for track position all day, which is going to be, A1 importance. And he was pretty solid here last year. I think that he kind of got roughed up by Kyle Busch on a later restart and kind of got shuffled back a little bit, but he was up there on the front row with AJ Allmendinger with a chance to win this race. So add another year of experience. And I don't hate Ty Gibbs at this 16-1 price. Martin Truex Jr., you think he's an auto bet at a road course at 20-1, but you just have seen too many mistakes. You've seen poor qualifying at times. You've seen just kind of a lackluster season, the final season at that. And, I just think even if Truex qualifies well, you'll still probably see a 12-1 or 13-1 price. If that's the case, I feel like it's a fairly, cheap practice in qualifying to see, because you can still get Truex at a good number if you think he has a chance to win after practice and qualifying.
Michael McDowell, road course extraordinaire racer. Ross Chastain starting to show consistent speed as the one. arguably the non-playoff driver that's shown the most consistency and momentum, the race at Talladega notwithstanding. When you look at those two drivers in a similar price range on the outside looking in along with Ty Gibbs, either one of those catch your eye in any capacity?
I would say Chastain more than McDowell. McDowell just hasn't been as good on these road courses. I think he's a top 10 machine. I think he's a potential top 5. We just haven't seen him kind of drive through the field and take the lead like he had in the past, like he did, I guess, last year. So I like McDowell. I don't love McDowell. I'm starting to fall in love with Ross Chastain. A deeper dive on just the speed charts at Sonoma, Coda, Watkins Glen, top 5 of all of those. You just throw Chicago out. I think that's completely just a different animal in all of itself. So probably my favorite play in this group would be this Chastain. I do think that Gibbs and Bell are also good plays, but we're getting paid properly. The most expensive guy is 16-1, and you can get up to 18 to 20-1 on Bell and Chastain. I think that those are all solid guys on road courses that have been successful that could get it done. So and remember, he's just concentrating on track position, and that is Ross Chastain. That's pretty dangerous. I think Ross has a little bit of speed right now and a little bit of momentum. I know he's not in the playoffs, but he's up there, mixing it up, and he's a tough guy to pass if he has track position, and he's going to have it all damn day long.
When we start to move from Tier 2 into Tier 3, we do have a couple of playoff drivers in Daniel Suarez, Alex Bowman, Austin Cindric, Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney. All, as short as 25-1 in the case of Suarez, upwards of 40-1 in terms of the trio of Penske drivers widely available. We look at Suarez, 13th or worse every trip he's ever made to this track, 30 or worse in each of the last 2 trips. Alex Bowman can easy for me to say, can comfortably race for points in this particular spot. 5 trips here to the Charlotte Roval, 10th or better in all those appearances. And out of a possible 10 stages, though, he's picked up stage points just 4 times, to your point, basically trying to flip and look for a finish more so than anything else. And then, of course, there's Kyle Busch nestled right into the middle. When we look at how he's performed at the Roval, he has been pretty damn good himself. And when we talk about drivers starting to pick up momentum as the season has progressed, despite not being in the playoffs, Kyle Busch would love nothing more than to continue his annual streak of winning at least one race that is continuing to be put on life support as we get to the tail end of the 2024 campaign.
Yeah, Alex Bowman, he's going to be points racing. I think he'll have kind of solid finishes. Again, if you beat the market on Bowman, let's just say you're tweeting at me, oh, I locked in Bowman at 30-1 and now he's 12. It's like, because he's 12-1, he's probably going to go capture some stage points in the first stage. And what that's going to mean is his odds are going to be more than 12-1 to win the race after that particular moment. So, just kind of steer clear of those guys. Gosh, Suarez, in our kind of our pre-show discussion, it's just, I just see him being the last car on the lead lap with a at a certain point throughout the race, a promising chance of advancing, and then but a very flimsy chance at that, and probably a mistake. So, and Kyle Busch, man, 30-1. Okay. I actually don't hate that at all. He was up there in a must-win situation last year, a couple of late restarts, got shuffled back, but had a chance on the front row at one point to take the lead. So we've seen a little bit of speed out of him recently. So if you are a Kyle Busch fan, or you think that he's going to qualify well, he's going to take track position all day long. I don't hate Kyle Busch at that 30-1 price.
Look, he has shown the flashes, and he has shown that he can be there in the thick of things late. A little bit unfortunate, may need a bounce or two to try and get things going the right way. But, those are some of the drivers that we have our eyes on. Of course, we'll all be rooting for Chase Briscoe to do the impossible and drive his car into victory lane to keep hope alive with the long shot future ticket that we have in our portfolio. But I'm not counting on miracles unfolding Sunday afternoon from the Roval. Wave the green, white checkered flag on stage 2. You can follow Chris on social media at ChrisWerme15. You can follow me there as well at Todd Fuhrman. Most importantly, be sure to follow the Bet the Board podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And like we've done all playoff season long, when we get to stage 3, it's all about trying to hit the reset button. And you mentioned William Byron clinching his way into the round of 8. We see him priced at 9-2. doesn't have him listed as the favorite, at least at a prominent book out here in the desert. Christopher Bell, 57 points clear, would take a catastrophic day at Charlotte to see him not as one of the drivers vying for a championship next weekend. 4-1, his going rate. Kyle Larson, 52 points clear, 7-2. Denny Hamlin, 30 points to the good, 8-1. Alex Bowman, not a whole lot of respect, despite being 26 points to the good at 25-1. Ryan Blaney right behind him, 25 to the good, 5-1. Tyler Reddick, 12-1, as his number has started to drift out a little bit. Chase Elliott, 13 points clear of the cut line at 14-1. And the four drivers that have some work to do: Joey Logano, he's the shortest of that quartet at 40-1, and Daniel Suarez, Austin Cindric, and Chase Briscoe all at 100-1 or longer. When we look at the playoff numbers, we're starting to see some of that movement. Is this the week that we consider trying to build out that portfolio and figure out if we can capture a little bit of value and maybe the outright 2024 NASCAR Cup Series champion?
Yeah, there's a couple drivers that have caught my attention. Denny Hamlin at 8-1 is one of those guys. Tyler Reddick at 12-1 is another. I do anticipate Tyler Reddick qualifying well, running up front, capturing some stage points, and doing exactly what he did last year. Going to capture stage points in both stages, work his way through the field, and just kind of settle into like a 5th to 8th place spot, very clear of the cut line, and just advancing. And this is good for Tyler Reddick, because you also have to remember that we're going to go to Phoenix for this championship. Now, you can capture a little bit of value there. And he was probably the second or third best car at Phoenix when we went there, back in March. Denny Hamlin, I think when you bet Denny Hamlin at 8-1, you're just betting on him getting to the Final Four, because he struggled at Phoenix so much. He's been solid, but never a real contender, in my opinion. But Denny Hamlin, you got four, if he does make it to the Final Four, Denny Hamlin will be around. I do anticipate him running good enough to advance. It could be something similar to last year, where he captures a bunch of stage points and there's a couple retirements and Hamlin's in, even though he finishes 28th to 32nd. That is a very distinct possibility with Denny Hamlin, but we are going to, I would say, 3 of his best tracks in Las Vegas, Homestead, and then, as always, one of his home tracks in Martinsville. So those are the 2 guys I have highlighted. But there's some guys laying in the weeds there. Alex Bowman at 25-1 has been good.
Can Bowman, in your opinion, and I ask this not to be an ass, but to ask the real question, do we think Bowman is a legitimate championship contender? We've seen flashes at Phoenix. We know it's his home track for the Tucson native. He's not a guy, full disclosure, that's ever really come across my desk and go, you know what? I got to make sure I have a little bit of Alex Bowman in my portfolio, because I just don't know if he can win on these 1.5 miles. And look, there's no wiggle room at these tracks coming up. You have to consistently be top 5 at Vegas, top 5 at Homestead to more or less point your way in.
Yeah, or I'm pretty sure he's gotten it done at Martinsville before, hasn't he? So I'd have to double check that. Was that Richmond? Or I'm pretty sure that's when him and Denny, their cars were facing each other when I don't know what year that was, but I'm pretty sure Bowman did get it done at Martinsville. So, but can he get it done at Phoenix? I mean, that depends. Does Chris Bell have issues at the next 3 races? Because I think
by the way, Alex Bowman did win at Martinsville back in October of 2021 in the playoffs. Since then, 12th, 11th, 32nd, and he finished 8th here in the spring.
Okay. So I guess to your point, he can get it done to get to the Final Four. And I think at that point you're looking to hedge out, right? If you're picking up this 25-1, I don't know that you're just going to sit there naked and try not to capture a little profits by hedging out and betting some of the other drivers. But I think everyone is looking at Phoenix and saying, if Bell gets there, this shit is over. And to be honest, I kind of agree. But he still has to.
He's got to get there.
Still has to get there. And if you're gonna. He could have issues. I mean, we've seen multiple times. We've seen drivers that are really need to perform in these cutoff races in order to move on. And Bell he's been a wild card. He's made mistakes. He has thrown away track position late in races. He's finished worse than his average running position as much as anybody, if not the most of anybody. in those, kind of those top tier drivers. So I guess if we're making the assumption that Bell is through, yeah, I think Bell at 4-1 is a really good price, but you still got to get there. And if he doesn't get there, I think it's a pretty big toss up as to who could run the best at Phoenix. I still think that Bell probably wins the race in Phoenix, but I think that, when it comes to winning this championship, it could come down to a stop. And if that's the case, Alex Bowman could run third or fourth and still win the championship. Do I think he could do that at Phoenix? I do. If I had to give the edge to a driver at Phoenix outside of Bell, I'd probably give it to Blaney. That would be my next best guy there. But we also haven't seen a ton of speed out of Blaney.
5-1 on Blaney for me right now, given the way he's running, just feels a bit short. I mean, I didn't expect to get massive prices on Blaney like last year. So I guess if I'm going through this, and again, another driver that's not going to say that Martinsville is his best track, although he did put his best finish at Martinsville on the books earlier this year. I mean, we talked about Tyler Reddick all season long as being the model of consistency, especially when we go. And while he hasn't run all that well of late, this is probably the best price that we've seen on Tyler Reddick since the middle of the summer, with that number drifting out to 12-1. And unless something calamitous were to happen at the Roval, he's one of the drivers moving on to the round of 8. And I think at the 1.5 miles, you have to put the 45 very much in the thick of things.
Well, especially Homestead. I think
once that high line comes in.
Yeah, that high line, it's obviously a Larson Reddick track. I think Truex runs well there. Denny runs well there. Chastain's run well there in the past. So obviously he's not in the playoffs, but I don't know. I like Reddick. I think 12-1's a good price. And remember, so if we were to go back and look, I think that Reddick and Denny are probably the best plays. And then maybe Bowman would be that next guy. Do I think Bowman's going to get it done? I don't, but you could definitely hedge out if he were to find himself in that final race at Phoenix. So, Chase Elliott's another one that's just kind of been hanging around. And I don't know if you know this or not, but he's good at Phoenix. And if he can just kind of figure things out at these 1.5 mile tracks, maybe a 14-1 price is good. I just like Reddick at 12-1 just because he ran so well at Phoenix earlier this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one guy that stands out in terms of current pricing. Full disclosure, don't actually have him bet at this point.
Nope.
Something that I might consider as we get closer to the weekend. But as we record here on a Wednesday, he has not yet come across my desk or been entered into the portfolio in any particular capacity. All right, my friend, it's time to wave the checkered flag and put a bow on this very fine program. But before we call things quits, heading into the Roval, where are we going to try and find a best bet? You were very prophetic 2 weeks ago, saying that if we didn't get closing line value, we liked our odds for Martin Truex to beat Kyle Busch. That came to fruition. Let's see if we can get our second straight winner and finish on a little bit of a heater as it pertains to some of the pre-week best bet options.
All right, I'm going to take my own advice and stick with a driver at this point in the week that I know will be capturing track position at both points or both stages of the race. He's shown us speed recently on road courses and a little bit of speed on 1.5 miles as well. And that's going to be Ross Chastain, top 10. This is only at one book, currently priced kind of at one of the legals, is Ross Chastain, top 10, -110 at Caesars. So go get that line. It's moved a little bit at some of the other shops. So Bet365 hasn't even put out their top 10 odds yet. So I guess you can wait for those if you want, but I do like Ross Chastain. I like that to kind of a -130 price. So if it does move a little bit, I like it as much as -130. This opened at +120. It's since been bet down. I think it's -175 some places, DraftKings, and -160 at FanDuel. So go ahead and get yourself some of that -110 at Caesars for Ross Chastain to finish in the top 10.
Get that Melon Man going as we try and cash the top 10. Hopefully we have a lot more in the way of actionable opportunities coming up, going to the 1.5 miles at Las Vegas, the 1.5 miles at Homestead, and of course Martinsville as well, the penultimate race of the season. So one final thing before we bid our listeners a fond farewell, Wormser, to reconvene next week when we know who the 8 drivers that remain will be. What time this week for the pre-race poll? I imagine you're coming back with all of your daily diatribes once we know how that field's going to stack up, and you can read all the crew chief comments, driver comments, and figure out if there are actionable elements given the uncertainty of the Roval.
Yeah, the Sunday's race goes a little bit earlier. So the pre-race poll will be at, let's see here, noon Eastern and 9 a.m. Pacific. So there's a 2 p.m. kickoff, it looks like, here for the Bank of America Roval 400. And I like to go 2 hours before the race. So that will be 12 p.m. Eastern and 9 a.m. Pacific.
Yeah, hopefully people have the multi-screen viewing experience up, because I'll be live on CBS Sports HQ previewing the NFL for the Sunday slate concurrently. So I will not be watching you in real time. I will have to wait until I get off the air at about 1 o'clock Eastern when those games kick off and tell you how right or how wrong you were with some of your driver ratings.
I'll look forward to my critiques, okay?
Look, as you should, kind sir. But all right, that's enough damage for one program around here. For Chris Werme, I'm Todd Fuhrman. Best of luck with all of your Charlotte Roval investments, both in the Xfinity and Cup Series. Most importantly, though, with a Ross Chastain top 10 ticket in hand before cars unload at the track this weekend, we'll see you at the window.